Hey guys, what is going on? Valk here. So the new dev notes just dropped and I'm pretty excited about it, so I kind of wanted to make a video, go over it really quickly and give you guys my quick thoughts. Apologies in advance, my voice is really hoarse. I've been battling COVID all week and I've been feeling pretty good, so I'm kind of just excited to talk about the dev notes and the patch. With the exception of like, it feels like it comes a little bit close towards the end of the season. Which, they did say they weren't gonna do, but hey, it is what it is. So without further ado, guys, let's just get into it. So today, it looks like we are receiving buffs to DJB, Haste, Shu, Alencia, Wanderer, Silk, Momorancy, A.Ras, Time Matter, Snow Crystal, and Turnus. So not a huge patch, but this badge does contain a good amount of tools to both kind of spice it up for both slow players and fast players. So first of all, we have DJB, who's arguably the winner of this batch. With this buff, basically, his S2 passive is going to just be moved to attach to his S1 now. He's going to lose his soul burn, where he can attack all enemies, and it's just going to increase the healing. So he's going to have a completely new S2, and what that is he's going to inflict barrier inversion, which is a new effect slash debuff, right? You kind of have to think of it like a skill cooldown delay, except where it isn't affected by effectiveness resistance. So what this is going to do is, based on the description, it's going to turn all barrier into damage. So if an FCC is giving like 4,000 barrier to all 14 members, right, this is going to do like 32,000 damage to their whole team, which, if you think about it, right, like it's 4 times 4, but since it removes a barrier and then inverts it, it does that damage twice. So if an FCC is giving 4k barrier to the whole team, it not only removes 4,000 HP, it also deals 4,000 damage. So FCC is looking like the biggest loser of this batch, just right out the gate, because if you're around any competitive community at all, this is huge news, because for the longest time, ever since her release, FCC's been touted as probably like the safest knight pick, and she's almost never moved from that, with the exception of when Operator Sigrid was really popular in the meta. And now with a barrier inversion hero on all 4 targets, what's going to happen is, if somebody picks an early FCC, you can heavily punish that FCC with an Opsig and a DJB, right? They'll be forced to ban one of the other, if not both. And on top of that, an FCC is basically a negative asset. If you let her barrier get inverted, she's just going to get cleaved. So that changes up a lot of things, and DJB is looking like he's super crazy for this patch. On top of that, and this is I've seen being talked about as a nerf. They reduced the duration of the immunity from 3 turns to 2, and then they lower the cooldown by a turn. And they also reduce the soul gain, but that's whatever, right? So I've seen this being talked about as a nerf, but I just want to bring up a couple of factors where this is a buff, okay? First of all, 3-turn immunity doesn't mean jack, because there are so many buff strip nowadays, right? If you think about what immunity is really good against for a standard player, right? You want your immunity to be retained against Archdemon's Shadow, right? And even then, she has built-in ways to strip immunity, so it's very meaningless for a 3-turn immunity buff. And on top of that, right, shorter cooldown for shorter duration. Now he has a lot of ways to get extra turns to cycle, so he's going to be able to get his extra turns. He's going to be on a faster build where he plays more aggressively, and he's cycling fast. So in my mind, this is more of a buff than it is a nerf. So just my 2 cents. I am super excited to play this guy. I pulled him on release with my old guildmate because we made a pact, and I'm honestly pretty excited for him to be a PvP hero. So up next, we have Haste. This is one of those ones where it's very easy to understand what they did for him. He is basically a slower Ran. Whether or not a slower Ran is good, that could be left up to debate, right? Everybody could argue that a slower Ran is just not, a Ran but worse, but there's 2 distinct advantages about having a slower Ran, right? And this is my argument for like them treating fast players as well as they have slow players for this meta. So if you're playing a style where I know a lot of people like to ban Ran, and then they like to tank down, because that way they're very hard to cleave. Ran is probably one of the best aggressive units to pick, to try to bust through a tank down with the defense breaks, right? Especially if you soul burn. But when people pre-ban the Ran now, you can just pull out a Fire Haste. He comes with the distinct advantage of cannot be counterattacked, so that's really, really nice. In scenarios where, if you think about how often there are things that can just counterattack and kind of really RNG out cleave teams, right? Green Violet, Rem, Green Armin now, and then we'll also have Shu upcoming in the horizon. So not being able to trigger a counterattack is really, really nice. And for cleave players, I think it's just very necessary to have one of these in the pocket if somebody pre-bans Ram but doesn't speed contest. And I think for players who pre-ban Ram but doesn't speed contest, right, they like to play tank down, you definitely have to be careful because somebody could just whip out a high effectiveness haste or even a DPS haste, and you kind of still are in a very precarious position. Up next, we have Shu, and this is where I feel like the tipping point has hit, because she's one of those heroes that's constantly received buffs, and then she's just never good enough. And I feel like we're finally at the point where all of these buffs are kind of catching up to her. Because if you look at the way her S1 works now, so her soul burn now has extra turns. That kind of helps out with her cycle, helps out with burst damage, and on top of that, right, it kind of helps you charge up that S2. And S2 now kind of absorbs damage dealt as health built in, and on top of that penetrates defense by 70%. Now, I don't know about you guys, 70% defense penetrated is a lot. The damage dealt has increased, granted, but it looks like the damage with 5 focus is going to be increased, and with, you know, extra turn soul burns and all of the extra counter attacks she's going to be proccing, I think she's going to be actually very strong. Because, like, if you guys just think about it, right? Think about all of the times you're playing standard and you're drafting against a Hua Young and you're just thinking to yourself, man, like, I wish I could pick like an APOC Ravi or a Rem-like hero, right? But water, like, it's APOC Ravi but water. I wish I could pick Rem but faster, right? This is where, like, I think Shu actually comes in really in handy. And I think she's definitely one of those picks you kind of want to have prepared, especially for those like Swiss Army knife situations going into last week where people are going to play slow and you're going to want a lot of tools to be able to deal with them. Alencia. Okay, so the buff they gave Alencia is that at the start of the turn, she has a 100% chance to proc Mind's Eye, which is actually really nice. So she's kind of like a Solitaria now, where during her turn, she'll just have extra effectiveness, which is definitely nice. But as a trade-off, both her S1 and S2 damage has been decreased. But to kind of compensate for this damage drop-off, they did give her a little bit of injury on top of that. I do feel like that injury is kind of negligible considering Bellion has like a similar damage scaling, and especially now that Alencia's damage is nerfed, Bellion actually does more damage to 4 targets. So I don't think this injury is something like you're gonna want to write home about. The biggest thing comes from her S3, which is increased CR by 50%. It's going to give her a more consistent turn cycling. And on top of that, her EE is going to give her a healing when she throws out an S1. And I think overall, her kit still doesn't gel enough. It's going to kind of come down to how much she's going to be able to land defense breaks on non-immunity targets and kind of just punch through with the extra attack. And I feel like that's always been her strength, right? She has a full strip on the immunity, and then she kind of starts breaking it. She'll be more consistent in this type of gameplay pattern, but it'll be really hard to say whether or not she kind of reclaims that dominant spot in the bruiser meta she once had. Okay, Wanderer Silk. There's one thing you guys need to know about this, and it's that she's a 14 speed imprint now, which is huge, because the only other 14 speed imprint in the game, I think, is like Fire Shuri, and I think also Fire Surin. Having a element neutral speed imprint, I think, is really good. And the one thing that makes Wanderer Silk stand out a little bit is that she's going to be a crowd control type speed imprint. So as opposed to Green Sitter or Watcher Shuri being able to kill something, her gimmick is that she's going to be able to, you know, obviously with the EE, right, reduce buff duration so she can inflict silence and then decrease combat readiness. That's going to be her shtick. And I think there's definitely like a place for her to be played, but I think primarily the traditional speed imprints are going to be more important. But I definitely think this was one of those heroes that goes from not seeing play at all to, oh yeah, speed imprint. Like, you could put speed imprint on any hero and they'll probably see play. Like, we've seen people speed imprint with things like Mursa and even like Gloomy Rain. So I think this is more than enough to guarantee her some level of play. You know, maybe not, she won't be very popular, but she'll definitely see action. Angelic Momorancy, I don't think her buff's too huge, but I think it's really nice for newer players. And I think gearing a lot of these like non-impressive buffs just to help out newer players, right? For things like Angelic Momorancy, for Angelica, right? When she got that EE, is really good for new players since these are more new player oriented heroes. In Angelic Momorancy's case, she's going to be able to dispel the debuffs before she heals off of S3, which I think is pretty big, considering that one of her biggest problems before was that she healed before she dispelled the buffs. So with that now, she'll be a little bit more reliable, but I don't think it's going to be enough to put her to a scenario where she matters in high-end PvP, at least. Adventure A.Ras is actually really solid. So he benefits from two things. So the first thing you need to understand is that they moved the healing that he gets from the rune previously to be an innate part of his kit. So that no longer needs to be upgraded, and he just heals a lot. Second thing is that he gives a sort of like a Bastion of Perlucia type barrier, which is 40% of his health. You know, on a unit that's expected to have about like 24k-ish HP very fast, that's actually very significant, and he's going to be able to protect one unit really well. As of present, he's already a very potent, what we call like a tempo knight, right? So he's a mitigator, and on top of that, if you can generate enough souls for him, he is really good at bringing a DPS unit with him on those dual attacks when he soul burns an S2. So with that in mind, I think A.Ras gets even better. And the other thing that makes him even better is that FCC is now falling off as like a default main tank, right? FCC falling off with, you know, the DJB buff means A.Ras can now see more play as like kind of the default like defense mitigator on top of being a very aggro enabling knight. And so far, that is all of our hero changes. Artifact changes aren't as big as heroes, but we'll go over them anyway. Time Matter. So Time Matter, instead of like an all or nothing artifact now, it has a floor and has a ceiling. So unlike Wind Rider, which went, I believe, 20, actually no, just like Wind Rider, which when you get 1/3 of the effect in the beginning, and if you can trigger it, you get the rest of the effects, which is about 2/3 of the effect. So I think it gives mages more option, but I think most mages in this meta are going to want to be book carriers anyway. So it doesn't really change any builds in my mind. Snow Crystal, effect res by 20% change into crit res by 20%. That one is super random. I'm not sure who it's made for. As far as Shu is concerned, I think she'll have a lot of options, right? Post update, she'll still probably want to be a Draco plate user, and there's going to be a few other things that she might want to look at as far as like Sigur's Scythe. But it's definitely a way for her to kind of cheat out a lot of CR, but I think things that enable her S1 will give her more CR anyway, since there's the CR push built into her S1. But that definitely interesting artifact, especially if you consider the fact that nothing really gives crit res. So just having like one copy of that could potentially enable some very interesting shenanigans somewhere down the line. And lastly, we have Eternus, which is kind of just like a very small designer Lilibet push. Now the only way I can see this used is like if you use it on a very fast DJB and you're meant to play this DJB beneath like Peyra and C. Lilius. So the moment they take their rotation, like boop, your guy takes his turn. And honestly, that's not bad. Like if you consider the fact that he's going to be able to push himself up and then he pushes your team, which is definitely really good. So I guess that's like better than nothing. But so far, the artifacts for this batch is not what's crazy, the heroes are. And if you guys need to know what to keep an eye out for, I would keep an eye out for these couple of heroes in the meta: DJ Basar, Haste, Shu, Adventure A.Ras, and maybe Wonder Silk, depending on how aggressive the meta is. So with that being said, guys, that is my patch review. Thank you guys for coming. If you guys, you know, thought of something I didn't think of, you know, I still have kind of that brain fog, feel free to leave in the comments. And if you have any questions, I do read every single comment. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.
Hey guys, thank you for watching the video. If you found it helpful or enjoyable, you can show support by dropping a like and a sub. It costs nothing. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave it in the comments. I read all of them. If you want to see more of my stats or strats, you'll be able to catch them in my Discord, link in description. That being said, I appreciate you guys for sticking it out till the end of the video. I hope you guys have a great one, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.